I am also very disappointed the Taoiseach has left, but I hope the Minister will pass on a couple of the points that I wish to make here, which largely revolve around the issue of Palestine. First of all, there's an extremely urgent matter that 6 Palestinian prisoners are currently on hunger strike. 2 of them, Kayed Fasfous and Mikdad Kwazame, have been on hunger strike for almost 100 days. Their lives are very, very seriously in danger, and all of the 6 are on hunger strike because they have been imprisoned without trial, in many cases repeatedly, denied any kind of due process. So this is a very urgent, life-threatening matter, and I would ask, and they are asking, and their supporters and families and so on are asking, that this would be raised as a matter of urgency and an appeal made to Israel to give them due process so they can come off the hunger strike, indeed, to release them. But that raises a wider issue, because the Taoiseach referred to his, and I would really like to ask questions about this, his attendance at the Malmo conference against anti-Semitism and remembrance of the Holocaust. Now, I want to, if you like, say at the outset, anti-Semitism is a vile phenomenon. The Holocaust is one of the greatest crimes that was ever committed by humanity against a particular group, the Jewish people, although there were other victims of that Holocaust as well, it is worth saying, gypsies, communists, trade unionists, but the major victims were the Jewish people in a genocidal assault by the Nazis. So we must absolutely commemorate the Holocaust and insist that it never ever happens again. But what is disturbing is that at that conference, as is the wont of Israeli political leaders, President Herzog made the following statement: "When criticism of a particular Israeli policy mutates into questioning Israel's right to exist, this is not diplomacy, this is demonization and anti-Semitism, because Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people." Okay, now this is a very familiar refrain. You can question this or that policy of Israel, but if you question the right of what some of us happen to believe is an apartheid state to exist, you're an anti-Semite. Now that is not acceptable. We should not sign up to definitions of anti-Semitism that suggest that, and we should be aware that Israel's claim to be the Jewish state representing the Jewish people is not a view shared by millions of Jews across the world. For example, a recent study in the United States of the Jewish electorate found 25% of Jewish electors believe Israel is an apartheid state, 22% believe it is committing genocide against the Palestinian people, 34% said Israel's treatment of Palestinians is similar to racism as the United States, is the same as that as racism in the United States, and 20% of young Jewish voters said Israel has no right to exist. Okay, now they're hardly anti-Semites. And it is appalling misuse of the terminology of anti-Semitism, and in my opinion it actually is an insult to the memory of the Holocaust to try and equate those two things. Israel is an apartheid racist state, and I say that based on its own legal constitution, particularly around the law of return. The law of return prioritises the rights of Jewish people to gain entry to the historic land of Israel or Palestine, whatever you call it, and deny that right to Palestinians, which exists under international law, UN Resolution 194, which Israel denies and has denied since its foundation, since it ethnically cleansed 1 million Palestinians. Okay? So it is a racist state in its fundamental laws. And it practices that persecution of the Palestinian people and the denial of their rights on an ongoing and systematic basis. And it is entirely legitimate to say that we should not accept the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, that the Palestinians have the right to return, and therefore to question the existence of the Israeli state and pose the possibility of a single state where Jew and Palestinian and Christian and Arab and people of no religion would have equality in a single state. Not everybody agrees with that, but a lot of people believe it, and it is not an anti-Semitic view to hold. And so we absolutely have to stand out against that, and I want to commend Sally Rooney, the author, for publicly declaring her support for the boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign, which calls for a boycott and divestment and sanctions against the apartheid regime. I didn't have time to raise the issue of the People's Vaccine, but I would only ask the Minister to pass on to the Taoiseach the request from the People's Vaccine Group that they would meet with the Taoiseach to discuss the waiving of the TRIPS patent restrictions on the production of COVID-19 vaccines and medicines and so on, because that is seriously inhibiting the global fight against the pandemic in the developing world.